This quote from Eagles coach Nick Sirianni, Mark Sanchez, top of next hour. He says, this is Jalen Hurts talking about his coach. Jalen Hurts says, well, Nick knows that I'm behind him, and he knows that communicating is important in a team sport, and he's doing a really good job of doing that. Okay. The new standard in Philadelphia for their head coach is don't yell at fans. That's a no-no. And communicating in a team sport is essential. Oh, boy. It's year 4. I'm watching Dan Campbell in year 4. The culture's right. The staff is right. The quarterback's the best he's ever been. Even better than McVay. O-line. It's a muscle car. I'm watching year 4 in Philadelphia, and Nick Sirianni just got scolded by the owner because he's yelling at fans, but he is a good communicator in a team sport. So when Nick Sirianni first got here, bad press conference, and after about a year, we're like, what does he do? Because he gave up the play calling to Shane Steichen, who's brilliant. And so that's not great. Whenever you're asking about a coach, hey, what does he do? Not great. The CEO of your football team. The second thing is he a distraction? And I can't help but do this. When you have a new quarterback class, and one of them by year 2, you're like, whoo, and one of them by year 4, you're like, I don't know if he can complete out routes. I don't know what Sirianni does. They've taken away play calling. He didn't know you shouldn't yell at fans. Now the standard is, in a team sport, communication's vital. He's getting good at that. It doesn't sound right. So here's Nick Sirianni this week on evolving as a head coach.
I just told the team that it happened, a bunch of different ways. There was a bunch of different ways that I learned this week. So what I said to the team is I put my head down. When you have criticism, when you have those different things, you put your head down and you work even harder.
Yeah, I know that's like a manual of cliches to succeed in business. Put your head down, work harder. Yeah, we know that. That's all guys when you get kicked in the groin. You put your head down, work harder. It's year 4. You just learned that. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be mean, but that's not year 4 stuff. I get you're an interim coach with the Jets. You're inserted as a former player to coach. And after a couple of weeks, you're like, hey, I'm getting my hands around this thing. I'm getting my hands around the play calling. I used to call plays. Now I'm the head coach. I've relinquished that play calling defensively to somebody else, a linebacker coach. I get that. I've been learning on the job before. But if I was learning on the job in year 4 here, I wouldn't get year 5. It sounds like it's just, again, I'm not saying you should always take jobs that are challenging. Andy Reid getting his arms around Kansas City for the first 15 months. I get it. Chip Kelly going from college to the pros in Philadelphia. Doug Peterson, first big job. I'll give you a year. Get your arms around it. I get it. I totally get it. You shouldn't take a job that's easy. But year 4, I want Dan Campbell. And I said this. I remember the first year when Detroit was losing games. And I said this. You go back and find the archive. I said, they're not winning any games. Nobody in the league plays harder. I think it was a game against Baltimore they lost at home. And I'm like, they don't have nearly enough good players, but that team plays hard. By year 2, you're like, that kneecap biting stuff, it's kind of what I'm seeing. By year 3, you're like, wow, Dan Campbell works. He knows what he's doing. We're in year 4. You can't be scolded because you're yelling at fans. I understand your first game, fans bark, you look up, say something. Okay, I don't know. I'm just being too critical. It'll probably all work out.
Okay, let's talk about this. I think, first off, I think a lot of people are going to probably get mad at Colin for saying all this about Sirianni and the Philadelphia Eagles and say that he's being a Philadelphia Eagles hater. But I think what you have to understand is Colin has an insanely high level of respect for the Philadelphia Eagles and what they do. He loves the culture there. He loves Howie Roseman. He loves Jeffrey Lurie, the owner and GM. You know, he's a fan of the roster. He has consistently said over years that he thinks that the Philadelphia Eagles are one of the best run franchises in the NFL for decades now, right? And he's highlighted them and highlighted their playoff wins, how for the last like 20 plus years, they're second or third highest in playoff wins, right? He talks about how they are consistently an excellent high-level organization. And you compare that to some of these other organizations where they've done nothing, or that they were great in the 80s and 90s and now have done nothing in 30 years, like the Dallas Cowboys, for instance. And so he sees the Philadelphia Eagles as just a high level organization. And I've talked about this as well, is that when you have a culture, when you have a team that players want to be in, players and coaches, like they people want to come to Philadelphia because they also know how highly run it is, and the culture and the fan base, right? It's one of the most successful NFL teams in the NFL. They're like top 3 or top 4, right? In highest valuation in terms of just financially, as well as largest fan bases, highest ratings. Philadelphia Eagles are a massive brand with an incredibly massive and passionate fan base. So you don't really need to sell players for that matter. So, or coaches. So when you have a coach like Nick Sirianni, it's like, is the standard too low, right? That's why he's kind of joking like standard, because you can see what some of these other coaches are doing, the culture that they instill, the preparation, what they do great. You can see what Dan Campbell does great. You can see what Sean McVay does great. You can see what Andy Reid does great. I'm not a super mega fan of Mike Tomlin, but you can see what he does great. You can't see what Nick Sirianni does great. And a lot of people want to say, because I've seen this from Eagles fans saying this, well, Sirianni has led this team to the playoffs every single year. And it's like, that's not really fully true. Yeah, he was the head coach, but it was the roster. It was the coordinator. Because then they're like, well, the roster wasn't stacked in 21. Yeah, but you had 2 great coordinators. And you had Shane Steichen. The team didn't get on the right track until Shane Steichen started calling the plays. And then you had the year of 2022, which was great. Came up a little bit short, but still an unbelievable season. And then 2023 was a disaster. And then 2024 has definitely been uneven. You can see teams when they're not healthy. Because I've made excuses for the Philadelphia Eagles. And have said, hey, they're injured, this, that, and the third. And that take aged perfectly. Because a lot of Buccaneers fans, right, the one game when the Eagles were really most hurt, they lose to the Buccaneers. And I was like, well, listen, they were really injured. And everybody was like, nah, it's no excuses, no excuses. Well, now the Buccaneers got rocked. And now they also lost their wide receiver. And they're going to be like, well, it was injuries. And it was like, okay, well, then why don't the Eagles get the benefit of the doubt for injuries? Like, that's weird. And yet, you can still see when a team is injured, but still well prepared. The Dallas Cowboys were injured, clearly not well prepared. Right? Kansas City Chiefs injured, clearly well prepared. Like, there's just differences. The Packers, injured, losing their quarterback, still well prepared. Well coached. So, that's the fundamental issue with Nick Sirianni. What does he actually do to elevate this team? What does he do? That continues to be the problem. And the Eagles deserve an all-time great coach. They're an all-time great franchise. They deserve an all-time great coach. And Nick Sirianni, to me, is not that guy. Maybe he's not the worst coach in the NFL. Maybe he's not the biggest disaster. Maybe he's got some weird quirks and this, that, and the third. That's fine. But it doesn't mean he needs to be the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. Maybe the Jacksonville Jaguars. You know? Maybe the Carolina Panthers. But not the Philadelphia Eagles. Where the standard is excellence. I mean that's what it is. Like I said, they until last season when the Ravens won, they were the second in most playoff wins in the last 20 plus years, the Philadelphia Eagles. Second to only the New England Patriots with Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. That's pretty good. getting to 2 Super Bowls in 7 years with a completely different coach and a completely different quarterback. That's unheard of. They beat the GOAT Tom Brady and were just a fraction short of beating the other GOAT in Patrick Mahomes. I mean, that's insane. That's insane. When you have teams like the Cowboys who literally can't even get to an NFC Championship game. So the level of the gold standard is true excellence for the Eagles. That's what's at stake here. Not to be a team that can just win some games, fight for a division, and win a playoff game or so. No, it's consistent greatness. And you got to ask yourself, does Nick Sirianni offer that? Offer consistent greatness for a franchise that has been consistently great for decades? Who have more Super Bowl appearances in the last 2 years than like 8 or 10 teams have just Super Bowl appearances in general in their entire existence. The Eagles have more NFC Championship game appearances in their last 20 years than like half the league has just playoff wins. Some even just playoff appearances. I mean, so it's insane what the Eagles have truly been able to do over the last, 2-3 decades. And you risk losing that when you don't have a great coach. That's what's at stake here more than anything. I mean, you look at how great this roster should be. And that's why a game versus the Bengals will be a very fascinating game. Because the Bengals are definitely not awful. I know their record isn't great, but they're definitely not awful. Joe Burrow is that dude. Their defense isn't good. And they're maybe not playing like this top 2, top 3 team, but they're not the Browns. They're not the Panthers. They're not the Patriots. They're not the Cowboys. Honestly, the Bengals are better than the Cowboys. The Bengals are not this scrub team. So this will actually honestly be a pretty interesting game to see how the Eagles fare against the Bengals. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the Philadelphia Eagles? Do you think Nick is the right coach for Philly, like Colin pretty much clearly does not believe? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions, let's get in some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I'd absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.